Welcome back to the Hoops Temple podcast. I'll be your host today, Aaron Schroeder of Possible Chairs. Joining me from New Zealand, bright and early, Dylan Williamson.
Yes, it's good to be back on the Bright and Early podcast. I am 6 a.m. Happy to be here.
It's 6 there? I thought it was 7. Is there two
No,
New Zealand time zones?
I think there's well, I mean it changes with that savings, but it's a good thing. I couldn't do it at 7 because I'm a working man.
All right. We'll get through this. Today we're doing the worst contracts draft, 10 of the worst contracts in the NBA, and then we're blitzing through the final 50 for our top 100 heading to next season. Worst contracts draft is something I've always wanted to do. It's always something I've wanted to steal from Bill Simmons. It's not nearly like we're not. If, I said if we were sponsored, then we can consider like stealing a bad thing. But until when there's no money involved, I'll take whatever from the biggest sports podcast on earth. To have the first pick for the worst contract. Before we get started, really quickly, the new TV deal and what contracts are gonna look like is always a looming thing. And so you can always say like, well, this contract won't be that bad by the end of it. And you're probably right. But given all of that, there are still some deals that are worse than others. And I'll leave it there.
Yeah, it is like an interesting thing to weigh up the fact that you sort of want to take for the worst contracts the overall negative value that you're going to accumulate over the contract. If you've got a guy that's worth 5 million and you're paying him 20 million, but you're paying him for 4 years, that's $60 million in the negative. But the cap is going to go up 10% every year. It's going to grow quicker than contracts are, and so there's also that to consider.
Absolutely. But I will hand the keys to you. Dylan, what is the worst
Oh,
contract in the NBA?
I'm gonna go with our boy out in Washington, who I did not even get close to considering for the top 100, and who's making over $30 million for the next 3 years. So probably worth, I don't know, $5 million a year. So we're 75 million in negative value roughly, and that's our boy Jordan Poole.
Poole isn't a top 100 player, and he wasn't really close to it last season. I feel like after he left the Warriors, people envisioned him with like unlimited offensive freedom and he could do whatever he wants. But it turns out what he wants to do is like score occasionally, not very effectively, and do nothing else. The impact of his game was completely lost without the structure of Golden State. He's on this 3-year $95 million deal. This was my pick for the worst contract. I mean, it's one of the only players I even considered where it's like long contract, high number, bad player. It's the three things you don't want.
Yeah, the only guy that's sort of in this range where you're actually like, well, I guess there's one other be interesting whether he comes up, but where you're actively like, this guy would probably get the minimum if he was a free agent if we're paying him over $30 million.
It doesn't really affect Washington. Like it's not going to hurt their long-term future. By the time they are actually competitive, they're going to be long out of that contract, and the benefit they get from the picks they got and the trade details and whatnot, like will help overall. But man, not a great look. All right, I think the next guy is pretty similar. My pick is going to be Zach LaVine and his 3-year, $89 million contract. He's been injured the past 2 seasons. He is really good when healthy. I think he'll be in our top 100 by the time we finish this. There's a chance he could be good, but there's no chance he could be worth this number.
And yeah, so here's a guy that will come up in the top 100, I think, in the back end. So at the very least, you've got that. Like at the very least, this is a starting caliber of guy, but a rough fit in terms of his play style, and then you also compound that with the fact that he's rough to fit in around from a contract perspective, and that he's taken up half of your salary cap, to be your third or fourth best player on a good team. And then to cap it all off, the Bulls went ahead and gave him a player option in the final year. So he also gets the flexibility of potentially getting an even worse contract
Mhm.
by opting out of that player option in the 26-27 season.
The number I provided, 3 years, 89, it counts that player options, $48 million the 2027 season. Um, when the Lakers can't get you, you know your contract's bad. Because I feel like they would have pulled any if it was 20 million, he would have been a Laker 6 months ago, a year ago. They would have figured that out, but they couldn't find a way to get Zach LaVine, and he screams like LeBron reclamation project, like, all over it, like, it's right there. Um, but they can't get out of that, and they're gonna have to play him. It really does hurt their situation because it's a team that's gonna really want a chance at the first overall pick, but they also kinda have to play Zach LaVine to rehab his value. It's just kind of a mess overall, but
Yeah, and also they also run into the fact that even though he's certainly not worth $40 million a year, and he's probably a very overrated player in terms of his actual value and just his box score numbers and what a casual fan might perceive of him. There's also the fact that like he isn't Jordan Poole, where he's going to be able to drag you down to 15 wins. Like he
mhm,
will accidentally win you some games on one of his hot nights,
mhm.
and so a bad fit in terms of he's not worth the money. He's too expensive to trade, which hurts his career and hurts the Bulls. But then also he's not good enough to make the Bulls good, but he's too good for them to be the worst team in the league. And so a lot of all-round negative value provided there.
Man, I wouldn't have minded him as the worst pick. It's pretty 1 and 2. Um, that leaves me with kind of a array of choices for the 3rd. It leaves you, actually. I don't have to make this decision. Leaves you for the 3rd pick, but, go ahead.
um, I'm gonna take Bradley Beal, who I think is actually probably in a similar range to Zach LaVine in terms of overall player quality. I think when we rank him, he'll come out in a similar sort of range. Zach LaVine, I feel like at least will probably play a lot of games, even if he's not going to win you a lot of games. He does at least have that value. Whereas Bradley Beal's going to miss half the season, and when he's there, he's like the if there was no considerations other than what's best for basketball, he'd be a sixth man this year. And the fact that he's making $50 million as your sixth man is probably one of the things that's preventing the Suns from being able to do that.
It goes back to the supermax, like, the worst idea the NBA ever had ever. The incentives for players to draft their guys and then develop them and then give them the most money so they would stay with that team, ended up just handicapping these mid-market teams, and that Washington handed Beal this 50 million a year average salary. He also has a player option for 2027, this time for 57 million. He is very similar to Levine. I think he's quite a bit better. Um, last season was a disaster. He was hurt the entire time. I'd like to think he could play a little bit more than that, but either way, you don't wanna play $50 million to a guy who, I mean, has a close to 0 chance to making an all-star team.
Yeah, and close to zero chance of being eligible for All NBA.
It's interesting when the Beal trade happened, I had mentioned that, maybe being injury prone isn't like you have weak bones or ligaments or, a bad knee. Sometimes shit just happens to you, and Beal
Yeah.
falls into that category where it's like he'll find a way to get miraculously hurt.
Mm. He's got like the Joel Embiid syndrome, where it's not like one injury that keeps recurring, but like every year it's it's fucking something. Your own teammate smashes you in the face in practice. Like everything, it just always goes against you.
Well, he came back and he got hurt, like, immediately again, and I forget how that even happened. I remember him kinda, like, diving for a loose ball or something. It was towards the top of the key. I forget how that happened, but it seems to happen, but, we'll see. Alright. The 4th pick belongs to me.
Yeah,
I think there's
I think it gets interesting here. I feel like
yeah.
those are the clear top three and guys that are way overpaid and have many years. It'll be interesting to see where you're going to go here.
I think I'm gonna keep it in the same theme, which is overpaid offensive-minded guards. I'm gonna go Damian Lillard's 3-year, $102 million contract. Dame is 34 right now. He's staring at $48 million this year. He has a player option for 2027 for 58 million. That's the biggest number we've talked about so far. It looked pretty bad last season. It seemed like like you mentioned when we ranked him for our top 100, the abdominal thing seems to really bother him. He did not shoot it well last season. He just wasn't the offensive superstar we've seen. And there's no way it's getting better. Like that's going to be about the same as it was next season. Um, and then going forward, I mean, how good do we think like 36-year-old Dame's going to be? Because it's not going to be $58 million good. But I think the biggest piece is how it ties to the Bucks' contention and having arguably the best player in the world, Giannis, on their team, and the timeline with him. And this is a contract so hefty it threatens like his placement on the team in the long term.
Yeah, and yeah, if you consider not only the value of this contract that you know we had a bit of debate about what sort of season Dame is likely to have. Like maybe it's a little bit of a bounce back. I'm very worried about him, the way that he I guess regressed from athleticism and a finishing standpoint. Not only that the shooting fell off last year, and that he is a small guard and he is getting old. So when you consider not only the negative value but also the fact that the way that he is going to hamstring the Bucks is probably, I would predict, what is going to end up costing them Giannis. Like Giannis is going to be a Laker in the 26 NBA season, and the reason that he's going to want out is that they're not going to be able to put around him a competitive team, especially with the new CBA making it harder for good teams to get better, or to keep good teams together. Um, like he's gonna find himself on a 500 team with owing Damian Lillard $50 million, and you know I think that's what's going to end his tenure with the Bucks.
Possibly, yeah. And I realized I totally messed up the numbers on the Beal and Lillard contracts. I said the right years, but I only included the guaranteed money, which is not with the player option. And so you're looking at
Can't forget those
150.
50. You can't forget those almost $60 million player options.
So Dame is 3 for 160. The 102 is the first 2 years. And then Beal is about 3 for 150. That sounds a lot worse, and we'll keep that in mind for sure. But Levine's deal is right, right? And Poole we got right.
Yeah, Pool's all guaranteed, which maybe makes it worse.
So
At
what
least
was
with
Levine's?
I think
No,
Levine has a
Levine's
player
was
option as
more.
well. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so I missed that. Um, so that's basically like what, 4 for 130? Sorry, 3 for 130 for Levine? Yeesh.
Not pretty.
Okay, that makes sense. Sorry, listeners. All right, back on the clock.
Okay, here comes an interesting one because when we're talking about contracts, we've got that phenomenon of that I brought up earlier where present value, and this is something if I can bring in my economics degree here, the concept of time value of money, cash flows in the short term are worth more than equivalent cash flows in the out years, especially when you compound that with the fact that we're getting 10% raises every year, and so $40 million in 3 years is worth a lot less than $40 million in 1 year, and there's a guy who is a minimum contract player who's making $40 million for this year, although he does become expiring after that, we are talking about basically $40 million in negative value, and that is the net superstar Ben Simmons.
Wow. I actually didn't have him. I didn't have him because it was so short. I didn't imply
Yeah.
by I didn't have the economics degree to make it make sense. It's like, well, this will end eventually, like the end of this season. But if we're talking just net value, yeah, I mean, it's the worst, it's probably the worst contract because it's a borderline NBA player. He's gonna play about 15 games, and he's making a ridiculous number.
Yeah, I mean, if we talk about Bradley Beal's probably overpaid by, I don't know, $20 million per season, and the third year is not guaranteed. So we're talking like, $40 million in negative value before that player option ticks it over, which is what you're getting from Ben Simmons as well.
My goodness. All right. I had the Nets, I think, winning 18 games. I started my predictions on TikTok.
Hmm.
That seems about right. I'm curious what they get out of Simmons.
Yeah.
I saw some
Yeah.
off-season posts. I heard he's in the best shape of his career.
Is he taking threes?
He's taking
He's,
threes.
he's
He's
taking
taking
threes in an
threes in
empty
that
gym.
one gym that Durant practices in with the magnetic rims. Just an unbelievable fall for Simmons. I mean, this is like just such a historic collapse from this guy's Magic Johnson with defense into the free throw shooting becomes such an issue that he basically can't play the playoffs into the last 3 seasons, basically. Now we're heading into year 4 of not playing, just not playing at all, and way too hurt, and when he does play, he's not effective.
Yeah, young king. He was the next LeBron. He
Mhm.
was the
He
young
was.
king.
Nope. There's, so many good options, so many good options. I'm gonna say Andrew Wiggins, 3 years, 84 million with that player option at the end that I factored in. It's partially Wiggins is borderline unplayable. He's been pretty horrendous last season. He misses a lot of time. And that the Warriors are trying to capitalize on Steph Curry's final great years, and Wiggins' contract is kind of sinking now. It's so hard to get around from like, hey, we have like a maybe starting caliber guy making 26, 28, and $30 million a year. That's just really hard to navigate around. And I think we'll look back on it and say, like, well, Wiggins helped them get the 2022 title. There's a pretty big reason why they couldn't contend in Steph's twilight seasons.
Yeah, and it's the same thing that we're talking about with Dame and the Bucks, where not only is this giving you negative value, but it's also going to have a long term effect on your franchise because it's so bad.
Hmm. I love it though. I'm into it. This is great. I can't stand them. Can't stand the Warriors, and it's too bad. I hope we understand at some point what's going on. There's a lot of like behind the scenes stuff that I obviously like. I feel for him in that sense. Um, I wonder if we'll ever know. But all right, you are
Yeah.
back on the clock.
Um, and it is not just that as well, like his actual on court stuff is, well, you say that off court stuff affects availability. I guess it could also be the thing that's affecting the on court stuff, but like he's fallen off massively from where we had him as a top 100 player last year, coming out of a really strong playoff showing,
Hmm.
um, to then become, you know, he was a Finals MVP contender, and now he's a bench player getting paid $100 million. Um, all right, back to me. I'm going to go with another surprise. I'm going to go short term again.
Mm.
To contextualize this, Andre Drummond this year, probably the best. He's not my pick. to
All right,
add context to my pick, okay.
all
Um,
right.
he was probably the best free agent center, or at least top three if we want to say Valanciunas maybe. And he is getting $3.28 million per year. Um, Last year he played for the Bulls, where he was probably also the best center. And the guy that was behind him in that pecking order, but ahead of him in the minutes, is not making 3 million, but is in fact making 20 million. And so we once again run into a guy who's so expensive that he is untradeable, and that affects your ability to rebuild your team. Too bad to win your games and too expensive to trade to lose your games. Nikola Vucevic. Um, I I think possibly one of the more overrated players in the NBA. The fact that the average NBA fan, and like if you look at like 2K ratings, like they've got him. Um, I actually don't know what they've got him at, but I imagine it's like in the 80s, where they see him as a clear starting center. But like this guy's a inefficient shooter, a ball stopper, black hole on offense, and one of the worst defensive centers in the league. And got outplayed by Andre Drummond last year, who's making $3 million, and the Bulls have to pay him 20 for the next 2 years, over 20 for the next 2 years. And so I think that's a lot of negative value. So I'm going to give the shout out to Nikola Vucevic.
Wow, I didn't see that one coming. I just didn't see the number as big enough to get that negative value, but Vucevic is not
Mm.
good. Not good. I don't think he's in our top 100. I don't think he's really.
No, he's a $2 million player making $20 million.
Yeah, I didn't have him. You didn't have him. Looks like Jack had him 153rd. My but it's so tricky. You look at the numbers, it's like this guy's 18 and 10 with 3 assists, but what you're getting offensively is basically the worst shooter in the league, the worst spot up shooter in the league by some metrics, and then defensively, he can't protect the rim. And so you're really not getting any offense value. That's probably neutral at best, and he is so miserable defensively. There's a time and there point where Vucevic is much more effective offensively, was shooting threes at a much better clip, was just a scorer, and that those days are gone, and now you're just kinda getting the bad parts of it, but bold pick.
Yeah, you get a offensive only center who is not good at offense.
Not loving that idea. Not super into
And
that
you get
one.
to pay him over $40 million for the next 2 years.
Yeah, the fact that he hasn't been traded to the Lakers yet is tells me how bad it is, because they'll pick up anybody, and that's my kinda the fact that he hasn't even been in rumors to the Lakers really tells you that he's not effective.
Yeah, to
Alright,
qualify for this list, you have to have not be a Lakers trade target.
you have to at some point, LeBron, like, tweets, like, the eyes emoji, like, under one of your highlights, and it's like, "LeBron, like, courting Ben Simmons." I'm sure he's done that at some point. Alright, with the 8th pick, I'm going long-term value. And I'm taking Karl-Anthony Towns' 4-year, $220 million contract. Will be making $61 million in 2028. Holy crap. For someone that we had that kinda snuck into the top 50, it's a lot of money. It feels like that contract is gonna hold the Wolves back, and they have the pieces with Gobert and with Edwards to be really impactful, and they're made just, like, a little bit better by the Towns piece, and he's probably worth about $20 million a year, but the fact they're paying him 3 times that amount is gonna totally hamstring their long-term outlook and how they're gonna build a contender around Ant.
Yep, and look, they got entirely bailed out by the fact that the Wolves are in a weird process of changing ownership. If this was just who's the current owner, Glenn Taylor? If this was just their current owner looking long term, Carl Towns would have been traded for like whatever negative value they could throw together to save money, because they're about to get ridiculously expensive, and this is not a market where they are willing to be ridiculously expensive. They would have blown this team up for cash savings. The fact that he's about to sell the team and isn't going to have to make those tax payments is the only reason that Carl Towns is still able to be on this team. Um, or they haven't, even worse, had to trade McDaniels or something to save money. Um, he's making them extremely expensive, and it will have long term effects. And then, like you say, he's a solid offensive player. Tough fit because you probably have to play him with another center, which means you're never going to be that great on offense. Um, he's a $20 million player making $50 million a year.
Essentially, I don't really know where the Wolves are going with their ownership thing. I know they're gonna sell it to that one group, and then they came out like they're not making the payments. And then the other group is like, it's not they're making the payments, that they got cold feet and don't want to sell because their team is good all of a sudden, and now it's worth way more. So I'm not sure if Glenn Taylor is actually going to sell that team, but we'll see. All right, you were back on.
Oh, it's me. Um, couple different directions I could go here. Let's see. We're gonna talk about this guy as a sort of back end of the top 100 player. Um, another one of these guys where they're providing really good offensive value and then makes it a hard fit scheme wise, but also hard to build your team because he's making so much money. Um, a contract that maybe cost them championship contention. Michael Porter Jr. is making over 115 million, well, about 115 million dollars over the next 3 seasons. Um, the fact that he is making that means that they had to let KCP walk, and I would predict are not going to be a championship contender for probably the rest of um, Nikola Jokic's prime, which is a tragic and an abomination for such a great player. And part of the reason that they're going into that is that their books are filled up with $35 million a year, going up to 40 million in the 27 season for Michael Porter Jr. To provide really solid shooting as a fourth option.
And I want to add on to that even more so. Another pick you could have gone with, and something I actually had a little bit higher, was Jamal Murray's 4 for 208 extension he just signed. They
That's
are
that's a, that's a good point.
the Nuggets are collecting these massive bloated deals, and I don't mind the Murray signing as much. Like, I think you have to. I understand the value they're getting and how that works, and someone is going to give him that contract, but they're looking at basically like you have Jokic, and then you have a kind of inconsistent second option, and then you're paying 40 million for what Porter Jr. is giving you, and I don't see the long-term outlook for them to be a contender again until I think they could trade that Porter contract. I think someone would take that. It's not that long, and they could probably go 2 for 1 for somebody, but you have to do that. You have to free up some space, and especially if you're gonna like, this is another season where they're running back just pretty poor depth. It's gonna get.
Yeah, and the Nuggets run into this unfortunate phenomenon where they are really eager to pay their own guys, but then they're not actually willing to make some big payments. Without automatically just like extend guys at their max, be like, yes, bring it back. Michael Porter Jr., give him all the money. And then like, ah shit, we're up against the tax. We better let our starting shooting guard walk for absolutely nothing on a reasonable contract. Um, and so, yeah, the on-court value is not there. The off-court value is an overall detriment to the life of the franchise.
Unfortunately so, and we'll get more into that for our Western Conference preview, but my final pick number 10. Alright. It's Drew Holiday, 4 years, $134 million. I didn't really like this when it happened.
Interesting.
I think it made sense to hang on to Holiday. Like, you just won a championship. There's no reason to feel bad about it. But when they gave me the extension, I'm like, "Oh, like, I really felt like Holiday was the right player. You just let, like, walk after 2 seasons. Like, he's gonna be, like, 36." You're like, "Alright, like, that's fine. We won our title. Like, let's move into some other direction with some younger pieces." But now they're caught with him in a nice $37 billion player option he's gonna pick up for 2028. Like, he's gonna be 38 years old or 37 years old, around there. Um, I don't think, I mean, he's gonna be close to retiring at that point, and that's a pretty good amount of money for a player that I don't even know if he's gonna be in the league at that point.
Yeah, and like the decline's already started. Like he's already no longer the best defensive guard in the world.
Mhm.
He's already starting to slow down on that end. And so by the time we're 38 and that inconsistent jump shot maybe rears its head again and he's slowed down defensively, that could be a lot of negative value. Um, and just from like I guess a macro perspective, um, I think we are going to see more of these kind of deals where, like a Michael Porter Jr., like a Drew Holiday, like a Jamal Murray, um, because the CBA makes it so hard to add players when you are already somewhat expensive. That the only real option you've got is to extend your own guys, and then those guys do have the leverage. Um, because from a Drew Holiday perspective, if I leave, you literally cannot replace me. You know, if I leave, it's fucking Jaden Springer time. Um,
Mhm.
and so I think that we could see a lot more of these extensions, which are bad, free agency contracts, which remain reasonable. If not, we saw a lot of guys get probably a lot less than what they're worth this free agency, but the extensions are already starting to look bad as teams are forced to overpay to keep players on board.
I totally get that. I'm just not sure who was even competing for, like, what other team was like, "I'll pay Drew Holiday 37 million when he's 38 years old." I think that'd be just such a bad value exchange, essentially. Like, I just don't think he's gonna be good. I don't think he'd be good
Mm.
at all. Like, I don't think it's that hot of a take. Like, Drew Holiday, probably not good in 4 seasons, but, well, that's our worst contract. Some honorable mentions I had, um, Kawhi is 3 for 150, Anthony Davis, 4 for 239. This is my favorite one, Zachary Shea, 4 for 55. I just it's the rookie scale is way too much for him. It's way too much money. It's like $15 million a year.
Yeah, no, you're right. The rookie scale probably has exceeded. Maybe they need larger raises on the rookie scale because definitely in like the first years, like there's no way that he's a $15 million player in the first 2 years.
Hell no. Absolutely, that's exactly it, especially for, like, what he is, like, close to 18-year-old prospect, super raw. Everyone knows he's not gonna be very good to start, and he's getting paid there. I was like, "Holy crap, he's like the 3rd highest paid player in the Hawks." Like, um, Harrison Barnes, 2 for 37. You have any
DeAndre
other?
Hunter, 3 for 69. While we're talking about Hawks,
Mhm.
just a backup wing getting over $20 million a year.
Zion, 4 for 163. Is that right? I need to double check these. That's right.
He at least does have some non guarantees in there, but um, the thing that people always forget with non guarantees, it's not if Zion weighs over 300 pounds and fails that um guarantee and gets injured and so fails that guarantee, it's not that it brings the contract down, it just brings down the guarantee, and so you've got to waive him to actually save that money, even if his
How
if his
good do you
last year's 50% guaranteed.
mm, how good do you think Anthony Davis is gonna be in 4 years? He's gonna be $70 million good?
Um, how old is he? He's not that old.
30,
No,
31.
he yeah, okay, yeah, he's a lot older a lot older than you think. No, I don't think he'll be worth that. Certainly not. Man, he's 31. He's his
Yeah,
prime is over.
2011, 2012 draft.
Nice. So the life after LeBron is really a myth. Once LeBron's gone, it's all over.
Who do you think retires first, Anthony Davis or LeBron?
Um, it's
I don't
it's
know, I just LeBron might hang on forever, and Davis seems like he's 6,000 years old.
yeah. I mean, at a certain point, um, LeBron may retire just because like he's not going anywhere. Like the team's not going to be good, and he's
Yeah.
not going to be able to really have the gravitas to get out. And so he might get to the point where he actually could still play, but like, what's the point to be the playing the play in again with 36-year-old Anthony Davis making $150 million a year.
I just want LeBron to be, like, fully gray. Like, just fully gray. Not a speck of color in his hair or his beard, like, still carrying Anthony Davis around. Alright, we're gonna transition into our top 100. Dylan, how much
Let's
time do we
go.
have?
Uh, we could probably get like at least half an hour, maybe up to
Alright,
maybe a little
let's
longer.
let's shoot for 75 and see where we stand.
Let's do it.
Dylan has other commitments outside of the podcast. We tried to get
Yeah,
him to quit his job, and he said no.
because you motherfuckers
I won't
subscribe
pay
to
you.
won't subscribe to Aaron's Patreon enough for him
uh,
to give me a full-time salary. Just to let you know that that minimum subscription is a minimum. You are supposed to exceed that. So while you can get all of that content for what, $3,
hmm
you
Just three.
are for $3 a month. That is the minimum. You are actually expected to bring it to more into the 12, $1,300 range.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, no, 12, 1,300 sounds about right. There are some people that have paid a little bit extra, and I appreciate them very much.
Shout out to them.
That's such a nice thing to add an extra dollar or so. It means the world.
They're some
All
real
right.
ones.
For sure. Number 51. So the way we're gonna do this is me and Dylan have our lists, we have our averages. We're gonna go off of our averages combined until we don't like it. And we might make some changes, but for the sake of time, and I want to talk about the players and less about where they rank more than I do to want to fight over the positions. But number 51, we have LaMelo Ball. LaMelo Ball also on the worst contracts out of mentions. I didn't mention that. 5 years, I think 203, or is that another option I'm missing?
uh, I think I've got
Not
it
203.
somewhere.
Full no options, just straight
Whew.
cash the whole way through.
Through
Um
the 2029 season.
Yeesh. Now I like Lamelo. I do see the world where it's like this crazy 6'6" offensive creator that can be an impactful player, but like his ankles are made of glass. Like it's like kind of frightening. Um he had a stretch where he got hurt, a 9-game stretch where he was averaging 32 points, 9 assists, 7 rebounds on 49% shooting. Like there's clearly something going on here. Um, how do you feel about him?
Yeah, I mean it's a difficult placement because he does have chronic unavailability, combined with the fact that he's probably not the best locker room guy either. Probably not a great culture guy, but is actually when he's playing and when he has some decent players around him, like is a real floor raiser. Can really elevate a team to a really good offense. Maybe not that efficient of a scorer, but the fact that he's willing to be a volume 3-point shooter does bring up that value a little bit. Um, yeah, I just think that this is still a guy who can elevate you to a really good offense. Um, Probably better than some of these guys above him, like looking through to you know Dame at 30. Um, when they're both healthy and on the court at what we expect them to be at in their career. At this point, probably not that much of a disparity, not 20 players apart. But the fact that he is chronically unavailable certainly drags him down. I was worried that he would end up lower, but we all seem to be pretty much in agreement with this placement for him, Jack included.
I'm excited to see it on the court. I think the Hornets will be exciting when he's playing. And the Hornets won 43 games in 2022. Like there's proof that this can be fairly successful, especially in the Hornets context where they've been above 500 4 times in total since expansion in '05.
Jesus.
So like, hey, for Hornets basketball, this is great. And you're heading in with I like Brandon Miller, and we'll talk about him maybe. Um, Maybe a healthy Mark Williams season. And yeah. Our next guy is Fred Van Fleet, another point guard. I think we all kind of panned the contract the Rockets gave him because it was just like this is weird and bloated and who wants this, but he was their best player last year. Crazy 3-point volume and good passing with pretty solid defense at the point guard spot. Really kind of made the Rockets a serious team.
Yeah, I actually do think that he's a pretty underrated player. Um, he like just the let me see if I can bring up the sort of impact numbers, but yeah, like you said, provides a lot of value as a 3-point shooter, which brings up his efficiency, brings up the fact that he can't finish um inside the arc. Um, Solid defender, and for several straight years on bad teams, There's some statistical evidence that he's elevating um, the offense. It's not a case of one of these guys where it's like, okay, he's a spot up shooter and a defender, but he's not really going to make you better. Um, the Rockets had a good offense when he was on and a bad offense when he was off. Same thing for the Raptors the year before. And so I do think that he is underrated just as a point guard. A lot of people consider him as the sort of combo guard who's providing that value there, but I do think that he actually is a good point guard as well.
I'm curious where the next chapter of his career takes him, like post Houston, because they seem pretty clearly ready to move in to a different direction with like Reed Shepard and whatnot. But
Mm.
number 63, maybe the best wing defender in the NBA, Herb Jones. Shoots 42% from three, 3.5 attempts per game, was first team all defense, fifth in defensive player of the year voting. Maybe some more minutes on the table for him if the Pelicans can kind of clear their logjam of wings. But Herb Jones coming in at 63.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what he can do with potentially a bigger offensive role as well if Ingram does eventually get moved out. Some of those shots might trickle down to him, and it'd be interesting to see if he's able to
53.
to
Sorry.
keep up his efficiency.
Absolutely. It's 53. I'm 10 spots ahead of myself. Number 53 is Herb Jones. All right. Another defense-oriented player, Evan Mobley. Do you think Evan Mobley is going to ever develop a jump shot?
No, and I don't think he needs to be a really valuable player. I think he's already one of the best defensive players in the NBA. The dream of him as like this unicorn two-way player, I think, is probably gone. But he at least already has become one of the best defensive players and rim protectors in the league. If he can continue to develop his rebounding, which was the one thing that he was lacking in recent years, um, then I think he's a top 5 level of center. And so, yeah, certainly a top 55 player.
How do you feel about him actually playing center with the Jared Allen combo? It just doesn't feel like I think the Cavs can be good doing that, but I think they can be great picking one or the other.
Yeah, I agree. Like they up until last year, like I said, the rebounding was such a big issue that you couldn't play him on his own. When he played without Jared Allen, he would just give up a whole bunch of offensive rebounds. But he's gotten stronger. His technique's gotten better. That rebounding is probably at a point now where he can be the main five, which does give them the opportunity to lean more offensive at bringing in a offensive wing, um, and not having to have concerns about him.
Do you know what coach taught Al Horford or helped Al Horford and Brook Lopez become better 3-point shooters as centers?
Would that be Mike Budenholzer?
Kenny Atkinson.
Oh, let's go.
Do you know
Kenny the
who
assistant. Let's
do
go.
you know who coaches for the Cavs right now?
Is that same Kenny Atkinson?
It's the same Kenny Atkinson. I'll thank Jack for this take. You're talking about Mobley, and he said, "I think Mobley's going to start taking and hitting threes." Like Kenny Atkinson is like the stretch five whisperer, and
Let's
I'm all
go.
in. I think might be something there, and that's what I mean. Could Evan Mobley be a top 30 player? It could be a top 20 player. It's the offensive end. And I think that's what people saw developing much faster. We haven't seen that yet. I think it's especially compounded by the fact they play him automatically next to Jared Allen, and that hurts spacing. But really interested to see his development. I mean, I hope you haven't sold your Evan Mobley stock.
Mm.
Hey, speaking of Jared Allen, that's our next guy, 55.
Perfect.
Well, what do we know? We know he's a good rebounder. we
And he's
discussed
a
those
he's
things.
still a really good rim protector. He'll get you some offensive rebounds. He'll clean up the defensive glass. He's at least competent enough as a dunker spot guy that he has played with another non-shooting center essentially for throughout this entire Cavs tenure. But yeah, a really good defensive difference maker.
Defensive difference maker, highly efficient player, shot 63% last season, 74% from the line, no issues there. He's received Defensive Player of the Year votes 3 times in his career. He was in 9th in 2019 and 12th in 2020. Last season, he was 10th. And number 55 locked in is Jared Allen. 56 is going to be dubious handle. It's Julius Randle. Now, I had a do you think we hate on Julius Randle too much?
I mean, it depends. There are people that talk about him, in like the range of like Pascal Siakam, who we had at 37. Um, if we're talking about him as the 37th best player in the NBA, then no, we probably don't. But like we do need to give him some credit of what he can do, which is he can create for himself and to a lesser degree for his team. But not only that, but he can also fit in as a part of a good offense. And also, while he's maybe not a great defender himself, he at least has proven that he's able to fit in as part of a good defense. You're muted.
Probably a good thing I was muted for that part. Alright.
You don't want
Randall,
to be on the
it
record praising Julius Randle.
yeah,
You self
I can't
sabotaged.
be I can't be shown doing that. With Randall, he's averaging 5 assists per game. He has really good playmaking and, I guess, like, playmaking in the sense of just generating offense with the ball in his hands more than the average power forward. Um, Maybe he'll hit threes again at some point. He kinda got, like, wildly inconsistent three-point shooting, both volume and
Yeah,
efficiency throughout his
yeah.
career season to season.
Doesn't he hit a lot of threes like every second year? Isn't he one of those guys where every second year he
Mhm.
becomes like a good shooter?
So, this past season and he was injured, so we'll keep that in mind. Maybe we'll bounce back for Randall, but 31% on 5 attempts per game. The season prior to 8 attempts per game, then 34%, so better volume, better efficiency, then back down to 30% and 5 attempts per game. Then 2021 back up 5.5 for attempts per game at 41%. So, I mean, this is his year. He's gonna hit 45%. I'm
It's
also
it's
really interested to see how the Knicks even work out this lineup because we've ranked Brunson, we've ranked Bridges, we've ranked um, OG, and now we're saying Randall's the fourth best player on his own team. Like, are the Knicks? It's going to be interesting to see what the Knicks closing lineup is because I think we like DiVincenzo, we like Hart, and we like
mm,
these players. Like, there's a lot of minutes to go around.
yeah, he could be the best player in the NBA that gets benched in the fourth quarter for matchup purposes.
Possibly. All right, 57 is going to be Draymond Green. I was higher on Draymond than the rest of you guys. I still
Yeah,
see Draymond
especially than
as
Jack.
where did Jack have him?
He ranked out to like 150 and didn't get up to Draymond.
No, I see 56.
Oh, okay.
Sec.
No, we're here, brother.
Oh, oh, you're right. That's Jared Allen. Okay, I need to talk to him about that. There's no way that's right. There's no way that's right. Okay, Draymond is still one of the 5 best defensive players in the world, and it's like whether you like that idea or not, he's gonna get to the playoffs, and he's gonna be the most physical player in the league, and he's gonna be better defensively than actual good defensive players because he's allowed to get away with anything, and that's value. He has that ability. He's gonna just attack people in the playoffs, and he's gonna get away with it, and that is defensive player of the year stuff. Um, I mean, that's where I'm at. He still provides elite defensive versatility, even as he's gotten older. And he shot the ball really well last season, too, close to 40% on 2.3 attempts per game.
Hmm. Um, yeah, it does provide all that value. As a playmaker, still like Steph is still way better when he's out on the floor. Jordan Poole, who was like a budding superstar with Draymond on the floor, is now unplayable. And so I do think that Draymond does provide value also as an offensive player, making it easy for his guards.
Yeah, absolutely. He still has that playmaking in the kind of like central hub um, offensive skill set that makes him very unique. But we'll lock him in at number 57. 58 is going to be Jalen Suggs, another defensive player. Second team all defense last season, 10th in defensive player of the year voting, and was one of the best like redemption arcs I've seen. I mean, I think I made a Jalen Suggs video like a year ago, being like, this guy sucks. Like this guy
Yeah,
really sucks. Like I can't believe
that's
they didn't take who was it? It was who the I don't remember. I don't remember how that draft was supposed to go, but still, it was like, hey, they shouldn't have taken him, and this guy can't shoot, and his defense isn't worth it, and all of a sudden, he hit 40% from 3, and it was, like, one of the like, basically the best three-point shooter on a Magic team that really needed spacing,
Mm.
and one of the best point of attack defenders in the league. Dylan's cat's going fucking crazy. I hear it. I can hear it.
um, yeah, Jalen Suggs, shout out to him who had everything going against him. You know, he's kind of a goofy looking guy. The jokes write themselves. Jalen Suggs, like if he hadn't developed into a universally respected player, like that's just too easy. Like he would never be able to live that down. But he's maybe now the best defensive guard in the NBA. And as you said, was able to progressive 3-point shooting to the point where it's not only a wasn't a liability like it was in previous seasons, but is now maybe something that's actually providing value to a Magic team that sorely needs it. If he's able to continue to develop as a playmaker, you know, then we're looking at like Drew Holiday 2.0.
Totally could be. And I'm so happy that he ended up being good because he was the most obvious, like, that guy's gonna be good at Gonzaga. And if that didn't translate, I wouldn't know what I was ever watching ever again. But it turned around, he figured it out. Yeah, maybe we'll learn not to give up. You know, the funny thing is, Chris Dunn, we named our Done or Done podcast the gimmick after him, and he came back too, and he stopped giving up on these like defensive guards.
That's true. That's true. Dante Exum back as well.
Yeah, maybe there's something to being like a bigger defensive-oriented guard. People, you figure out how to shoot, just learn how to shoot, and you'll be back in the NBA.
Yeah, it's not that hard. Just learn how to shoot.
It's not that hard. Okay, next guy on the chopping block is going to be number 59, Chris Middleton. Where are you at with Chris? Last season, you mentioned a Danny Granger-esque fall off. I don't think the medical situation in the NBA allows for such an extreme fall off anymore, but wasn't really that impressive in the time that we got.
No, yeah, had a really rough season. Wasn't nearly this good last year. Struggled scoring. The advantage creation had I think fallen off, which prevented his really good passing from the wing position. One of the better passes there. And then also looking really slow, which affected him. Where in the past he was a real positive defensive player. Um, I do, however, have faith that a lot of that was injury related, and he actually looked quite good in the postseason, which was reassuring. And so I think we're going to get a bounce back from Chris Middleton, where he's going to be able to once again be a really efficient scorer. Going to be able to provide defensive value, be part of a really good defense, and be sneakily the best passer on the team as well.
He averaged 25, 9, and 5 on great efficiency in the playoffs against the Pacers. The Pacers defense isn't exactly the toughest, but I'd still like to see that him be able to create in that way. Played 27 minutes a game last season. Efficiency was pretty good, but I think you're right. It looked labored. Like the eye test looked like he was having a hard time getting to his spots. He just wasn't as quick. I think this is the right spot for him. Maybe he comes back around next season, but the Bucks really could use his some more volume from him again.
Yeah, they're really going to need him because they struggled overall as a team last year without him, and he's really the I think the difference maker for them. He's going to be the one that if he's able to bounce back is going to let them be a really good team again. And we'll come to that when we do our final off season win total projections.
Absolutely. All right, we're running the clock down. We're getting to 65, and we're calling it. We've done. I think this is about as fast as you could possibly go without just not having at least one exchange per player. Um, Number 60 is Aaron Gordon, one of the last remaining pieces on the Denver Nuggets. Um, you always like Gordon. Tell me how you feel about him.
Um, Possibly the best like big wing defender in the league. Athletic enough that the fact that he's a reluctant and mediocre shooter doesn't matter. Like he can just not spot up from the corner, but just drive, cut along the baseline. Really intelligent cutter that way. But most of it is just like this is a incredibly solid defender who does also provide offensive value.
So
That's
so
maybe
efficient,
foreshadowing as well.
possibly. maybe a little. um, so efficient, 56% from the field, really strong defender, and he's listed at 6'8", 235. He's the guy they've stuck on LeBron. He's the guy who's going to be guarding those bigger, tougher matchups. Well, he also adds a little bit of kind of playmaking with the ball in his hands, that just a lot of offensive versatility. You see him like coming from the Orlando years where he was asked to create a lot with the ball in his hands, and now it's so good off ball. It's so good off ball. With the 61, it's going to be Alex Caruso, possibly the best defensive guard in the league. We talked about Suggs. I think it's a pretty good conversation between these guys. On the Thunder now, which is like, I'm not happy about that. Not thrilled about that one. That's ridiculous and unfair to replace their most problematic player, both on and off the court, with the one of the best point of attack defenders who can also guard wings and bigger guards and basically anybody. Is it makes me upset.
Yeah, and if we're going to say Jalen Suggs is maybe the best on-ball guard, Alex Caruso I think is universally recognized as the best off-ball defensive guard. The way he's able to dig and recover and really just be a menace no matter what he's doing when he's on the defensive end of the floor. And the three-point shooting has really developed in terms of volume and efficiency.
Yeah, last season shot 40% on nearly 5 attempts per game, and second team all defense, 10th in defensive player of the year voting. I hate the Thunder. All right. Well, I don't hate the Thunder. I don't hate them yet. I'm just saying I hate the idea of how good they're gonna be.
You're
Number
gonna hate
60.
them when they sweep you in the first round.
Yeah. But I have to see, like, the Kings have actually won a playoff haven't won a playoff game in 17 years. It's like, oh my goodness. Like, I still have to break that one. All right. Franz Wagner, maybe the best player of the Magic? Maybe. He's good on defense. I think the jury's out on his offensive impact. He took a huge step back shooting last season. Shot 36% on 4.5 attempts in 2023. Then in 2024, 28% on the same volume. Really weird 3-point fall off. You'd like to see him develop more as a shooter.
Yeah, and that's the big thing that's made me hesitant about him. Like there are a lot of people I think they'll probably have him a lot higher, maybe more in like that sort of Scotty Barnes range in the low 40s. But the shooting is a big concern. I'm not sure that he's an offensive floor or ceiling raiser at this point. But if that shooting can come back, the thing that he's able to do as a guy on the wing with that sort of size um, could be a real value add.
Yeah, it absolutely could. And I'd love to see that develop. And I think you see we have like Suggs above Bronze right now. And I think that makes sense for the current, like what happened last year, how great Suggs was defensively. I think with the upside, I mean, you'd really like to see Bronze develop. I think that's the Magic are hoping for. But our next guy is number 63, DeJounte Murray. And I will let you take this one because I have nothing good to say. I have nothing good to
Oh yeah,
say.
you're a lot lower on him than I am.
I don't know what's going on here. I don't know what you guys are
You had
seeing.
him in the 70s. Me and Jack were in agreement in the 50s. Inefficient scorer, but a lot of that is shot selection being forced to be um, the guy that's creating or playing off of Trey Young, who's not maybe necessarily putting him in the best positions. Um, Not a good defender, because he doesn't try, but has a history of being a really good defender. And so all this is a play on the idea that in a bad situation, like he's not maybe the 63rd best player in the NBA, but in a better situation, like he can create shots, he can finish at the rim, he can shoot a decent percentage on threes on a reasonable volume, and when he's not being asked to do everything offensively, hopefully he's able to reclaim some of that defensive glory that he had in his early career, where he was, you know, similar to Alex Caruso, where like you had to not only look at who was guarding you, and then look at the player that you wanted to pass to, look at his player, but then you also had to look on like the other side of the floor to make sure that DeJounte Murray wasn't just going to come and steal your pass. And hopefully he can get back to that level now with a reduced offensive load.
It's totally possible, and I see that path for him in New Orleans, but at the same time, I just don't know if he wants to. Like, I think he
Yeah,
likes doing this,
yeah,
and what
you could get that sort of Jeremy Grant effect where he's very content being an efficient scorer that gets have the ball all the time.
absolutely. What made DeJounte special in San Antonio is he was a great passer and he was really active defensively. And now he isn't either of those things. And I don't know if he wants to be those things again. And I think he traded those traits for being like a little bit higher volume, less efficient scorer. And that's like the last thing I'm interested in. I also just feel like his attitude fucking blows. I just don't know if he's a good locker room presence. Number 64 and 65, very similar players. We're talking stretch fives. It's Miles Turner, then it's Brooke Lopez. I'll comment on Turner. The last 2 seasons have just been a revelation. He was like the trade candidate of all trade candidates, MVP of the trade candidate team. And all of a sudden, he had these really great offensive seasons. He shot the ball really well. He's remained a pretty impactful rim protector. Um, he keeps the Pacers defense from being the worst ever, I'd say, like, they go from the worst of all time to, like, bottom
Just
5, and
bad.
that's a pretty big jump. But he's still I like how he plays in the Pacers offense. I think he runs the floor well and spaces the floor well. He fits well next to Halliburton.
uh, yeah, but, like he always had that sort of stretch, 5 aspect, the 3 and D game, but I think his 2-point game and his pick and roll play has really developed. His screening, which is a difficult skill for young centers to learn, I think has really improved over the recent years. And the only reason I don't have him higher is that he hasn't proven to be a that much of a floor raiser defensively, um, despite what some people might consider his defensive reputation. A guy that is a floor raiser defensively, though, is Brook Lopez, who, when he's on the floor, he's our number 65. You're pretty much guaranteed to be a good defender. He is probably the all-time leader in um, box out to assist. Well, sorry, to box out to rebound ratio, as in the amount of rebounds that he's generating for your team versus the amount that he actually grabs himself. The inverse Andre Drummond, you could call it. Um, which provides a whole lot of defensive value as well. Which Miles Turner is it's still sort of the one area where he's lacking a bit. Um, 3-point shooting has sort of waxed and waned in the recent seasons. He's still got that ability that if you've got him on a mismatch, you can just dump the ball down to him and he will just put a guard in the hoop. And so another year older, we could see a rapid drop off. But for now, Brook Lopez number 65.
I feel good about that. You could convince me to flip those guys, but it's gonna age a lot better having Turner ahead of him. Lopez is 36, he's gonna be 37. You're looking at well, I don't feel like his game is gonna age poorly. I mean, we're just getting to the point where like, is he gonna stop playing basketball? Like we're getting really close
Yeah,
to retirement age for Lopez. But yeah,
yeah, 7 footers at that age, like the drop off a lot of times isn't gradual, it's sudden, he could just come into next season and not be able to shoot and not be able to move well enough to protect the rim anymore.
yeah. All right, we did it. Worst contracts and a top of 65. Dylan, where can the people find you?
Every second week on the Hoops Temple podcast.
And you can find me doing the same. You can also find me Possible Chairs on TikTok, Possible Chairs on Twitter, my Cameo, where you can pay me to spread Franz Wagner propaganda, as well as my Patreon, where for just $3 a month, you can get all of these lists and many more lists and write ups and a billion other things. So please go check that out. Thank you.
And once again, just to reiterate, that is from $3 a month. If you want to pay more, you're more than welcome. If you want to pay $1,200 a month, and enough of you do that, then we can go from every second week to every week.
That's true. We're only $1,200 away.
Yeah, yeah. And
Well,
we're not talking about one person. We're talking about, if 100 of you were giving $1,200 a month,
yeah.
that would really help out, guys. We'd really appreciate it.
It's only 1,200. What could it, how much could it be?
Yeah, it's the wealthiest nation in the world, and you guys can't afford $1,200 a month.
I'll teach you about some economic disparities in America. All right, bye, guys.